The sky had not been blue for 3 years. Pogdone stood on the broken rooftop of what was once a hospital and looked at the gray clouds that covered everything. The air was poison. The water was poison. The earth itself had turned against humanity. It was the year 2047, and the world was dying. Dohan was 34 years old, but he looked 50. His face was thin, his eyes were tired, and his hands shook when he held his old rifle. He was the leader of the Sole Survivor Coalition, a group of 12,000 people who lived in the underground tunnels beneath the destroyed city. They were hungry. They were sick. Every day, more of them died. He remembered how it all started. The collapse, they called it. First the power grids failed. Then the food systems. Then the governments fell one by one like dominoes. War came after that. Nuclear fire. Chemical weapons. In just 80 months, 8 billion people became 800 million. The survivors were scattered, broken, and waiting to die. Dohan had stopped praying long ago. There was no one listening. That was when the ship came. It appeared on a Tuesday morning, breaking through the gray clouds like a mountain falling from heaven. It was enormous, bigger than anything humans had ever built. Its surface was dark and smooth, and strange lights moved across it like living things. Dohan watched it descend. His people screamed and ran, but he did not move. He was too tired to run, too tired to be afraid. If these creatures had come to kill them, then at least the suffering would end. The ship landed in the ruins of the old Olympic Stadium. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then a door opened, and they came out. They were not what Dohan expected. They were tall and thin, with bodies covered in hard shells like insects. They had 4 arms and 2 legs, and their faces had no mouths that he could see. Their eyes were large and dark, and very gentle. Dr. Yoon Hana was the first human to approach them. She was a scientist, a biologist, who had studied life in all its forms. She was also braver than anyone Dohan had ever known. She walked toward the creatures with her hands raised, showing she had no weapons. One of them stepped forward to meet her. It was larger than the others, and it moved slowly, carefully, like it was afraid of scaring her. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. 2 species meeting for the first time. Then the creature did something strange. It lowered its head, a gesture that somehow felt like respect. It took 3 weeks to learn to communicate. The creatures called themselves the Morith. Their leader was named Kivan. He was old, even by Morith standards, and he had traveled across the stars for 200 years. Kivan explained that the Morith were traders and healers. They traveled from world to world, exchanging knowledge and helping those in need. They had found Earth by accident while running from troubles of their own. When they saw the state of the planet, they knew they could not leave. Dohan did not trust them. How could he? Every powerful group he had ever known had only brought pain. Governments had lied. Corporations had stolen. Armies had killed. Why would these aliens be different? He asked Kivan directly, standing in the ruins of a broken world. What do you want from us? We have nothing. We are nothing. Kivan's answer came through the translation device Hana had helped build. His voice was soft and sad. We want nothing from you. We see suffering and we wish to help. That is all. No one helps for free, Dohan said. There is always a price. Kivan was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke again. Long ago, my people were also dying. A great sickness came to our world, and we had no cure. We sent calls for help across the stars, but no one answered. We thought we would disappear forever. Then strangers came. They gave us medicine. They saved us. When we asked what they wanted in return, they said only this: remember kindness. Pass it forward. One day, you will find others who need help. Help them as we helped you. Kivan looked at the gray sky, at the broken buildings, at the sick and starving humans. Today, we found you, and we will help you. Not because we want something, but because you need it. That is reason enough. The Morath stayed for 3 years. They brought machines that cleaned the air. They brought technology that made food from sunlight and water. They brought medicine that cured diseases humans could not even name. Slowly, impossibly, the world began to heal. Duhan worked beside them every day. He learned their language. He learned their history. He learned that Kevin had lost his own children to the sickness that nearly destroyed his people. He understood now why the old Morath cared so much about saving others. On the day the Morath left, Duhan stood with Hana and watched their great ship rise into a sky that was finally, after so many years, turning blue again. Kevin spoke to them one last time through the communication device. "We will not return. Our journey takes us far from here. But we ask one thing of you. Remember kindness. One day, you will be strong. One day, others will need your help. When that day comes, remember what it felt like to be helpless. Remember what it meant when strangers showed you mercy." The ship disappeared into the clouds. Duhan stood there for a long time, tears running down his face. Hana wrote in her journal that night, "We were shown mercy when we deserved nothing. We were saved by strangers who asked for nothing in return. This debt is sacred. This debt we will remember. No matter how long it takes. No matter what it costs. We will remember." And humanity did remember. 150 years passed. The children of the survivors had children, and those children had children of their own. The gray skies became blue. The poisoned earth became green. And humanity, once broken and dying, reached up and touched the stars. Admiral Big Jiwan stood on the bridge of the starship Unity and looked out at the endless darkness of space. She was 52 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen both war and peace. Behind her, a crew of 300 worked at their stations, monitoring systems that would have seemed like magic to the people of 2047. The Unity was the flagship of the United Earth Defense Fleet. It was not the biggest ship humanity had built, and it was not the most powerful, but it carried something more important than weapons. It carried the promise humanity had made long ago. Jiwan's grandmother had been alive during the collapse. She had been a little girl in the tunnels beneath Seoul, eating food made by Morath machines, breathing air cleaned by Morath technology. Before she died, she made Jiwan promise to never forget where humanity came from, to never forget what they owed. Jiwan had never forgotten. In the year 2197, humanity was no longer alone. They had joined the Galactic Assembly, a council of 47 species from across the stars. Some were old and powerful. Some were young and weak. They traded, they argued, they made treaties, and sometimes broke them. It was politics on a scale humans had never imagined. Ambassador Shin Yuna represented Earth in the assembly. She was small and quiet, with a gentle smile that hid a mind sharper than any blade. Her great-grandmother had been Yoon Hana, the scientist who first spoke to the Morath. The duty of speaking for humanity had passed down through her family like a sacred trust. Many species did not respect humans. They saw them as newcomers, short-lived creatures who had barely left their own planet. They expected humans to be aggressive, greedy, hungry for power. That was how young species usually behaved. But humans surprised them. When a plague struck the Ven homeworld, human medical ships were the first to arrive. When earthquakes destroyed cities on Thelis Prime, human engineers helped rebuild them. When refugees fled the civil war on Korath, human colonies opened their doors. Again and again, humanity answered calls for help from species that could offer nothing in return. The Galactic Assembly did not understand. In their experience, Power meant taking. Strength meant domination. Why would humans sacrifice resources, time, even lives for strangers? Commander Oh Tae-yun was one of those who gave his life. He had led a mission to rescue survivors from a burning space station. The station belonged to the Relic, a species that had voted against humanity in the assembly just months before. Tae-yun knew this. He went anyway. He saved 47 Relic lives before the station exploded with him still inside. When asked why humans did these things, Yuna gave the same answer every time. We remember what it means to be helpless. We remember what it felt like when strangers saved us. We made a promise to pass that kindness forward. We will never let another species face darkness alone. The assembly members looked at each other with confusion. Promises? Kindness? These were not the words of power. These were not the strategies of empire. They waited for the hidden plan, the secret agenda, the moment when humans would reveal what they really wanted. That moment never came. Years passed. Humanity continued to help. They asked for nothing. They demanded nothing. Slowly, other species began to trust them. Not all of them. Not completely. But enough. Then the reports started coming in. Ji-won was in her quarters when the message arrived. It was marked urgent, classified at the highest level. She read it 3 times to make sure she understood. The Morath homeworld of Kiva had gone silent. For 200 years, the Morath had traveled to stars, helping others as they had helped humanity. They had returned home only recently, tired from their long journey, ready to rest. Communication with them had been regular and warm. Elder Kivin had died decades ago, but his grandson, Kivin II, had continued his work, and now there was nothing. No signals, no ships, no response to any message. Ji-won felt something cold settle in her chest. She remembered her grandmother's stories. She remembered the gray sky and the poisoned earth, and the moment when strange ships descended from the clouds. She remembered the dead dot she called an emergency meeting with Admiral Command. The faces on her screen were grim. "We need to send a reconnaissance mission," Ji-won said. "Something is wrong. The Assembly has not authorized any action in that sector," one of the admirals replied. "We would need their approval. Then we ask for approval. And if they say no?" Ji-won was quiet for a moment. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about Yoon Hana's journal, passed down through generations. The words still clear after a century and a half. "We will remember. Then we go anyway," she said. Some debts cannot be ignored. Some promises cannot be broken. The other admirals looked at her. They saw the determination in her eyes. They knew the stories too. They had all grown up learning about the collapse, about the Morath, about the sacred promise humanity had made. One by one, they nodded. "Send the mission," the senior admiral said. "Find out what happened to our friends." Ji-won closed the channel and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the light of distant suns, the Morath were in trouble. The species that had saved humanity was now the one that needed saving, and humanity would answer. No matter what it cost. No matter how long it took, because they remembered. They would always remember. Captain No Seonghwa was 28 years old when he saw what fear truly looked like. He had commanded the reconnaissance vessel Remembrance for 2 years, exploring distant systems and mapping unknown space. He thought he had seen everything the galaxy could offer. He was wrong. The Remembrance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Morath space, and Seonghwa felt his heart stop. Where there should have been busy shipping lanes and orbital stations, there was only wreckage. Ships torn apart. Stations burning. Bodies floating in the cold darkness. "Get me a scan of the planet," Seonghwa ordered, his voice barely steady. The results came back in minutes. Kiva, the beautiful green homeworld of the Morath, was burning. Great fires covered entire continents. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were now rubble, and moving across the surface, like locusts consuming everything in their path. Were the invaders? The Keth. Sangwa had heard stories about them. Ancient species from the far edge of the galaxy. Conquerors who had destroyed civilizations before humans had learned to make fire. They moved in great waves, taking everything, leaving nothing behind. No negotiation, no mercy, only conquest. He recorded everything his sensors could capture, and fled back to Earth as fast as his ship could carry him. The images he brought changed everything. Admiral Big Jiwan watched the recordings in silence. Around her, the other military leaders of Earth sat frozen, their faces pale. They saw Morath civilians running from Keth soldiers. They saw children separated from parents. They saw old Morath, too slow to escape, cut down where they stood. How many survived? Jiwan asked. Unknown, Seongwa replied. There are resistance pockets. Maybe a few million hiding in the mountains and underground. But the Keth control everything else. They are exterminating them, systematically. Jiwan closed her eyes. She thought of Elder Kivon, dead now for many decades, who had descended from the clouds to save humanity. She thought of his gentle voice saying, "Because you needed it." That is reason enough. She opened her eyes. We need to bring this to the Assembly. We need a coalition response. The Galactic Assembly met 3 days later. Ambassador Shin Yuna stood before representatives of 47 species, the recordings from Kiva playing on massive screens behind her. She spoke with passion. She spoke with urgency. She begged them to act. The response was silence. Finally, the representative from the Korvax collective spoke. He was an ancient being, thousands of years old, respected throughout the galaxy. The Keth are powerful beyond measure, he said slowly. They have destroyed empires that were old when my species was young. To fight them is to invite our own destruction. We must negotiate. We must find terms they will accept. Terms? Yuna's voice shook with anger. What terms? The Keth do not negotiate. They consume. The Morath tried to surrender. They tried to talk. The Keth answered by burning their cities. Then perhaps the Morath should not have resisted at all. The coldness of those words struck Yuna like a blow. She looked around the chamber at the other representatives. Some would not meet her eyes. Others simply looked away. You will not help them, she said quietly. We will send diplomatic envoys to the Keth, the Korvax representative replied. We will seek peace through discussion. War would only bring more death. For the Morath, death is already here. The vote was held. By a margin of 32 to 15, the Galactic Assembly chose diplomacy over intervention. They would talk while the Morath died. Yuna returned to Earth that night. She walked into the council chamber where the leaders of humanity were waiting and told them the result. She watched their faces change from hope to anger to something harder and colder. So we are alone, Jiwan said. Yes, then we fight alone. Dr. Yoon Myra, a historian who had spent her life studying the Morath, stepped forward. She was old now, in her 70s, but her mind was still sharp. In her hands was an ancient book, the journal of her ancestor Yoon Hana. 150 years ago, she said, we were dying. Our world was poison. Our people were starving. And then strangers came from the sky. They asked nothing from us. They gave us everything. When they left, they asked only one thing. Remember kindness. She opened the journal to a page marked with a faded ribbon. My ancestor wrote these words the day the Morath left Earth. This debt is sacred. This debt we will remember. No matter how long it takes. No matter what it costs. Every generation then has read these words. Every child on Earth learns them before they learn to count. She looked at the council, at G1, at everyone in the room. Are we worthy of those words? Or were they just sounds we made to feel good about ourselves? The silence that followed was heavy. Then G1 stood. The Morath saved us when no one else would. They showed us that kindness could exist even in the darkest times. If we turn away now, if we let them die because the fight is hard and the cost is high, then we do not deserve to be called human. She looked at each face in the room. I will take the fleet to Kiva. I will fight the Keth alone if I must. Who stands with me? One by one, every hand in the room rose. The United Earth Council voted that night. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would go to war. Not for power, not for territory, not for resources, for a debt owed to strangers who had once descended from gray skies and shown them mercy. The Morath would not face the darkness alone. The first human ships arrived at Kiva on a cold morning in the Morath calendar. The Keth had expected no resistance. They had conquered this sector easily, crushing the gentle Morath with barely any effort. When sensors detected the human fleet, the Keth commanders felt only amusement. What could these short-lived creatures do against an empire that had devoured civilizations? They learned the answer quickly. Admiral Beak Jiwan did not attack the Keth directly. She knew her fleet was smaller, her ships were weaker, and her technology was less advanced. A direct battle would end in destruction. So she fought differently. Human ships struck at supply lines, appearing from nowhere and vanishing before the Keth could respond. They attacked fuel depots, communication stations, and transport vessels. They freed Morath prisoners and armed resistance fighters. They fought like ghosts, always moving, never staying in one place long enough to be caught. The Keth did not understand this kind of war. For thousands of years, their enemies had faced them in open battle and been destroyed. These humans refused to stand and fight. They were everywhere and nowhere. They were infuriating. The first year cost humanity 40% of their fleet. Ships burned. Soldiers died. But they did not retreat. They could not retreat. Behind them was a dying world and a promise made a century and a half ago. General Im Seojin led the ground forces. He was a large man with a quiet voice and sad eyes. Before the war, he had been a teacher. Now he taught a different kind of lesson in the second year. Seojin landed on Kiva's northern continent with 10,000 soldiers. They fought through Keth patrols for 3 weeks, losing half their number, until they reached a mountain range where Morath survivors were hiding. When Seojin's soldiers appeared at the cave entrance, the Morath inside thought they were Keth come to finish them. They prepared to die. Then they saw human faces. They saw human hands reaching out to help them. An old Morath female, her shell cracked and her eyes dim with exhaustion. Why? She asked through a translator. Why do humans die for us? We cannot help you. We have nothing to give. Seojin knelt beside her so they were at the same level. His uniform was torn and blood-stained. He had not slept in 4 days. A long time ago, he said softly, when my people were dying, your people came to help us. You asked for nothing. You gave us everything. Your leader said to remember kindness. We remembered. The old Morath began to cry. She had not cried since the invasion began. She had thought tears were useless. But now they fell freely, and Seojin held her hand until they stopped. The war continued. Years 3 and 4 were the darkest. The Keth brought more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. Human colonies on the frontier were attacked. 3 worlds fell. Millions of civilians died. Lieutenant Kang Hyunji became famous during this time. She was a pilot, small and fierce, with a temper that scared even her own commanders. Her squadron was assigned to hold a critical jump point that the Keth needed to bring in reinforcements. They were supposed to hold for 12 hours. They held for 72. When the relief fleet finally arrived, only Yoonji and 2 other pilots were still alive. Their ships were barely functional, held together by emergency repairs and desperate prayers. But the jump point was still in human hands. A reporter asked Yoonji later how she had survived when everyone said it was impossible. "It was not impossible," she replied simply. "It was just very hard." The Morath faced impossible odds when they chose to help Earth. We can do hard things for them. In year 5, something began to change. Other species, the ones who had voted against intervention, started to send help. Quietly at first, ships with no markings, supplies with no return address, volunteers who claimed they were acting alone. The Galactic Assembly officially maintained neutrality, but its members were watching. They saw humans die by the thousands for a species that could offer nothing in return. They saw a debt being repaid in blood. By year 7, humanity was no longer alone. 12 species had joined the fight openly. More helped in secret. The tide was turning. A Keth commander was captured during a battle in year 7. General Im Seojin interrogated him personally. "Why do you sacrifice so much for these insects?" The Keth asked through the translator. His voice was genuinely confused. "They are weak. They have nothing you need. This war makes no sense." Seojin looked at him for a long moment. "You would not understand," he said finally. "You have spent thousands of years taking. You do not know what it means to give. You do not know what it means to owe. The Morath helped us when we were weak, and they asked nothing. Now they are weak, and we are here. That is all." The Keth stared at him. In his ancient eyes, there was something that might have been fear. Not fear of human weapons. Fear of something he could not understand. Something that could not be conquered. Year 8. The final push. The human fleet, rebuilt and reinforced, gathered at the edge of Keth space. They were joined by ships from 20 different species. In the center of the formation was the new flagship, named Remembrance after Captain No Sam's ship that had been destroyed in year 3. Admiral Baek Ji-won, her hair now fully white, stood on the bridge. She looked at the stars ahead. Beyond them lay the Keth homeworld. 2 million human soldiers had died in this war. 60% of the original fleet was gone. 3 colony worlds would never be rebuilt, but they were still here. Still fighting. Still remembering. G1 opened the channel to all ships. "Today we end this," she said. "For the fallen, for the Morath, for the debt we owed." The fleet moved forward into the darkness. The Keth Empire fell on a day that had no name. Their homeworld surrendered after their fleet was destroyed, their colonies cut off, their supply lines broken. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Keth knew defeat. Admiral Baek Ji-won received their surrender personally. She stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, facing a Keth general whose pride had been shattered beyond repair. "You will destroy us now," the general said. It was not a question. It was what the Keth had always done to those they defeated. "No," Ji-won replied. The general stared at her, not understanding. "You will be held accountable for your crimes," Ji-won continued. "Your military will be disbanded. Your weapons will be destroyed. But your people will live. We will help you rebuild, if you allow it." "Why?" The word came out broken. Confused. G1 thought for a moment before answering. "Because someone once showed us that kindness is stronger than cruelty. We will not become what we fought against. The cycle of destruction ends here." The Keth general had no response. In his entire long life, he had never encountered anything like this. Mercy given to an enemy. Help offered to those who had killed millions. It was beyond his understanding. Perhaps in time he would learn. Perhaps not. But the offer was made. 1 month later, a single human ship flew to Kiva. It was not a warship. It was a transport, small and unarmed. On board was Admiral Jiwan, Ambassador Shin Yuna, and a delegation of human leaders. They landed near the ruins of the old capital, where Morath survivors had gathered from across the planet. Millions had died during the occupation. Those who remained were broken, starving, lost. Elder Kivin II was waiting for them. He was the grandson of the Morath who had saved humanity so long ago. He had led the resistance through 8 years of horror, watching his people die while waiting for help that many believed would never come. Now that help stood before him, Jiwan walked toward him slowly. Her uniform was simple, without medals or decorations. She wanted no symbols of victory. This was not a moment for pride. Kivin II looked at her. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking. "You came," he whispered. "After all this time. After everything. You came." Jiwan took his hands in hers. They were so different, human and Morath. Different shapes. Different colors. Different worlds. But in that moment, they were the same. "Your grandfather saved my people," Jiwan said softly. "He asked us to remember kindness. We remembered. We will always remember." Kivin II fell to his knees, not in worship or submission, but because his legs could no longer hold him. The weight of 8 years, the weight of millions of deaths, the weight of almost losing hope, all came crashing down at once. "The debt is repaid," he said through tears. "What your people have done, what you have sacrificed, we can never repay." Jiwan knelt beside him. "There is no debt between us now. There are only friends. That is all we ever wanted to be." Around them, humans and Morath came together. Soldiers who had fought side by side. Doctors who had healed each other's wounded. Children who had grown up in underground shelters. Human and Morath playing together because they did not know they were supposed to be different. The galaxy had expected humanity to claim victory, to demand territory, to build an empire on the ashes of the Keth. They were wrong. 3 months after the war ended, Ambassador Shin Yuna stood before the Galactic Assembly one final time. She was old now, her hair white, her body tired. But her voice was still strong. The chamber was silent as she spoke. Representatives who had refused to help sat in their seats, unable to meet her eyes. Those who had joined the fight late looked at her with respect and shame mixed together. Yuna did not accuse them. She did not shame them. She simply spoke the truth. Humanity entered this war with 300 warships. We finished it with 120. We lost 2.3 million soldiers. 3 of our colony worlds will never be rebuilt. Our economy was damaged for generations to come. She paused, looking around the chamber. We did this for a species that could not help us win. We did this for a people who had nothing to offer except a memory. 150 years ago, the Morath saved us when we were nothing. They asked us to remember kindness. Today, that promise is complete. Yuna straightened her shoulders. We owe the galaxy nothing. We ask for nothing. We demand nothing. But we will leave you with a question. When you looked away while innocents died, when you chose safety over honor, when you let fear make your decisions, what did you become? What will your children say when they learn the truth? And most important of all, what will you remember? She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, there was only silence. Complete, absolute silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Then the representative of the Rillick, the species whose people Commander Otean had died saving years ago, stood up. He bowed deeply toward the human delegation. It was a gesture of respect that his species reserved only for heroes. One by one, other representatives stood. They bowed. Some wept openly. The silence continued, but it changed. It became something else. It became acknowledgement. It became shame. It became a promise that this lesson would not be forgotten. 50 years later, a monument stood on Kiva. It was made of stone from both Earth and Kiva, mixed together. On it were carved the names of every human and Morath who had died in the war. Side by side, equal in death as they had been equal in the fight. Kang Yunji, the pilot who had held the jump point for 72 hours, visited the monument on the anniversary of Liberation Day. She was 97 now, the last living veteran of the original human fleet. Her hand shook as she traced the names of her fallen squadron. A young Morath child approached her, curious about the old human. "Why did your people help us?" The child asked. "We were strangers to you." Yunji smiled, her eyes distant with memory. "We were strangers once too," she said, "and strangers helped us. All we did was remember." She looked up at the twin suns of Kiva. That is what it means to be human. We remember, and we try to be worthy of being remembered. The galaxy had remained in silence that day in the assembly. But in that silence, something had changed forever. Humanity had shown them what it meant to repay a debt, and the galaxy would never forget.